Welcome to Broad Strokes, Fortune show where we talk about the news that matters to women. So this week I'm joined by Claire Zillman. She's our London correspondent. It's awesome to have you in the New York studio, especially because we get to talk about Sheryl Sandberg. So Sheryl Sandberg's been pretty quiet since the election, but that definitely changed in the last few days. First, she posted on Facebook coming out against Donald Trump's executive order that basically says the U.S. will no longer fund NGOs that offer counseling about abortion. And she really backed it up by donating $1 million of her own money to Planned Parenthood. And she also was at a conference where she said, you know, essentially, I'm sorry that I haven't been speaking out on some of these issues. And she really called her silence, particularly on the Women's March in Washington, a mistake.
Right. That was such a big event, a worldwide event, and it was right in her wheelhouse, and we didn't hear from her, and that was really disappointing to a lot of women. And we've heard a lot of feedback lately by CEOs against Donald Trump's executive orders, but a lot of those voices have been male, so it was really nice to hear from her.
Yeah, I mean, you can understand why executives like Sandberg are in a tough position. You know, you're a top exec at a big public company, and talking about politics is a little scary. But at the same time, she's really chosen this for herself, this role as someone who speaks out about women's issues. So it's really interesting to watch her sort of trying to thread the needle there.
Another piece of news that really caught our attention this week was a new study by Pew Research, and they gave us some new insight into women's gains in the overall U.S. workforce, and the news was not great. They found that the progress that we've made in terms of making up a larger and larger portion of the workforce is actually plateauing and may never reach 50%.
Yeah, that was really disappointing and surprising. I mean, we consistently have been making so much progress in this area. And the researchers did not really say why we're going to see this reversal. But one thing I thought was really interesting is that they called out that particularly mothers are dropping out of the workforce or not joining in the same rates that we've seen in the past. And it makes me wonder about childcare. I mean, we've talked so much about how expensive childcare is. And at a certain point, if you're only making so much in your job and it's costing you more to take care of your children, it makes more sense for women financially to stay home.
It was surprising that they didn't pinpoint that exactly, but they did talk about a reversal towards more typical gender roles at home. So I thought that was really interesting. But there was also a good piece of news from the report, and that some of the women are not working because they're going to school.
So I also want to ask you, since you're here in New York today, about women's news outside of the U.S., and if there are particular stories that you think that we should be keeping an eye on.
Right. I think we have to talk about sort of the whirlwind that Theresa May went through in the last week. Last week she was facing criticism because she didn't come out and say, I'm going to address women's issues with Donald Trump when I meet with him. And that controversy was quickly forgotten because on the same day she visited the White House, Donald Trump issued his very controversial travel ban.
Yeah, and she's taken some flack about how she responded to the travel ban and the fact that she has invited him to come to the UK, right?
Right. She was very slow to respond, and her response was not as harsh as I think a lot of people wanted. There was big protests this week in London outside her residence, and then there was a petition that got 1.5 million signatures, people asking Donald Trump to be uninvited for the state visit.
Yeah, and if as if that wasn't enough, she also has Brexit on her plate. I think there's been some movement on that this week.
Right, that's her primary concern, and this week she got a big vote from Parliament that really gives her the okay to go ahead with the Brexit process. So we're looking towards March, which is her deadline to really start the divorce from the EU.
Okay, so we have to keep an eye on Theresa May because she's got a lot of things going on. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have this week on Broad Strokes. Come back next Friday for another episode on Fortune.com.